welcome to the post-budget WA this week. And look, what a disappointing state budget. And, you know, I've characterised this budget as a budget of missed opportunities by the McGowan Labor government. They simply haven't done the work to deliver a budget that's going to make any meaningful difference to the state of Western Australia. You know, what have they done? Once again, they've just gone for some cheap sugar hit. Pretty obvious that their so-called rebate to houses, the $400 on electricity charges, is all about the federal election where they're hoping to improve the Labor brand. Nothing about systematic reform or changes to the cost structure for houses that are struggling right across Western Australia. And I just want to go through that in a little bit of detail. You don't need to look very hard in the budget to realise their so-called $400 rebate, given all of the increases they're making to a range of government charges, actually only nets out at $244. For the Premier and any Labor people to go out and say they're giving $400 back to the households is just a lie. In fact, the other fees and charges reduce that amount to $244. But more importantly, since Labor's come to power, the increase in underlying fees and charges, or the underlying increase in fees and charges to households, and this is what the budget calculates as a typical household, is $1,050. Now you're paying that, you're going to pay that year in, year out. And let's go through what they've done in this budget. They have the smoke screen of the $400, which, as I've outlined, isn't actually a net of $400 to the houses. Vehicle licensing charges up 3.4%. Electricity charges up 2.5%. Water charges up 2.5%. Public transport fees up 2%. The emergency services levy that every household pays up 5%. And next year, they're increasing even further. So in what they call the forward estimates, so they do the budget over a 4-year period, or at least forecast over that period, we see further increases in all of those fees and charges next year. So as I say, we've got a state Labor government that's using your money to try and trick people into voting for the Labor Party in the federal election, but not actually doing anything meaningful to reduce ongoing fees and charges for households in Western Australia. You know, you're going to be paying all of those increased fees next year plus more. You know, so it'll be way more than $1,050 increase per the typical household. And of course, we know the typical household fees rarely actually represent a real household. It's actually much more than that for many households. The thing that's disappointing is, where was the long-term relief? Look, we're enjoying what can only be described as a gold rush at the moment in terms of commodities. And I know lots of people are doing it tough individually, but as a state, we've just had unparalleled growth in wealth in the state on average. You know, Western Australia now accounts for around 60% of Australia's export income. The state government is enjoying massive royalty payments and other payments. Where's the bonus for the people of Western Australia? You know, if the government was serious about giving relief to households who are experiencing a lot of stress now because interest rates are going to go up, they're at historic lows, they were obviously going to go up, but they're going up, and we know they're going to go up a bit more in the future. But fuel costs, other costs are going up. Households need relief. And the government could have done that by freezing fees and charges. Why didn't they freeze them? Why say you're giving back $400, but actually you're increasing the underlying rate? I mean, it's just a trick. You know, they're hoping that the public of Western Australia won't realise that they're actually going to pay more in the future for all of this. They're hoping that you'll be tricked into thinking that this is some sort of benefit for you. And I think Western Australians are smarter than that. Certainly the feedback I've had in the short time since the budget is delivered is that people are seeing that this is just pure cheap politics, nothing about structural reduction of fees and charges for householders in Western Australia. I do want to also contextualise the position that the government's in. Now, the Premier came out He announced a $5.7 billion surplus and is boasting that somehow this is due to his good management. And in fact, the simplest of analyses shows that this is completely untrue. And I'll contextualise that for you. Since 2017, this government has enjoyed an income rise of $16.5 billion above the last year of the Barnett government. $16.5 billion increase in state government income. That's an eye-watering 66% increase in state government income off a base of $25 billion when they came in. Even despite the $16.5 billion increase in income, we see a budget of $5.7 billion. So what's going on here? You know, this is a government that boasts that it's been prudent with financial management. But in fact, the state government have increased their expenditure, their ongoing recurrent expenditure, by $8 billion. A 30% increase. They haven't been careful with your money. They haven't invested that money back in reduction in fees and charges. They're spending money, but of course, as I've pointed out on a number of occasions in this podcast, what we're not seeing is the positive outcome for the people of Western Australia. Even more yesterday, and I thought this was just utterly disingenuous of the Premier. He says they're reducing state debt. Well, for 1 year, we're going to see a minor reduction in state debt. And as I said, contextualise that. They say that state debt's going to go down by something like $2 billion against a $16.5 billion income increase since they came to power. I mean, that's clearly a drop in the bucket, and of course they haven't reduced it significantly in the previous years. But guess what happens next year? State debt goes back up and continues to go back up. So again, we've got a Premier who's trying to paint himself as some sort of fiscal genius. You know, all of that increase in income has been nothing to do with the state government. As I've pointed out, they've actually substantially increased their expenditure, increased it by 30%. So they haven't saved money, they've spent more money. The increase in that income is almost entirely due to matters outside their control, primarily iron ore royalties. The federal government, the federal Liberal government GST fix, is adding, I think this year, something like $4.6 billion above what it would have under the original GST formula. So that's a massive part of it as well. There's been some stamp duty and some other monies come in. Also, federal government grants have increased as well. Nothing to do with anything this state government is doing. And, you know, then we look at delivery. One of my substantive criticisms of this government is they talk big about money. They say they're spending money here. They say they're spending money there. But what do you actually see? Look at the Metronet project. This is their signature project. I think their official numbers are up to about $8 billion for a project that was estimated to cost $3 billion. With some very minor scope changes to that. They're making more announcements about more contributions on spending on that program. They still haven't delivered anything. The Forestfield Airport link. I mean, they inherited that project underway 5 years ago, still not complete. And now they're saying that project is going to be delayed further. That's true of every project under the Metronet banner. Every project is years overdue. And also billions of dollars collectively over budget. In fact, many billions of dollars over budget. The Labor Party can't deliver. Look at our hospitals. When the Liberal government was in power, the Labor Party described 1,030 hours hospital ramping, or at least ambulance ramping for ambulances outside hospitals. They said 1,030 hours was a crisis. Now we see ramping normally around 5,000 or 6,000 hours. And you must know that if you've got a loved one who's had to go to hospital, sitting outside in ambulances, people having elective surgeries cancelled, regularly now code yellows and even code blacks where hospitals are at risk or in fact can't take any more patients. They haven't delivered in health. They continue to spruik dollars, but they don't deliver meaningful change that makes any difference to the experience that people have going to those hospitals. Let's look at infrastructure. They love putting on their fluoro jackets and their hard hats and going out and standing in front of a big bulldozer somewhere saying they're going to spend infrastructure. Last financial year, the Labor Party failed to deliver $1.7 billion of their promised infrastructure projects. This financial year, they've failed to deliver another $1 billion of the projects that they promised. And what have they done? Have they said, look, actually, we can't deliver these, let's cut this back and let's only promise what we can deliver? No, they've actually increased the budget $1 billion above where they couldn't deliver this year. And it's all about spin. It's all about the photo ops out there with their fluoro jackets on and hard hats. They love it. They love putting up big signs. I tell you what, if putting up big signs was their KPI, they'd be on top of it. But the truth is that they cannot deliver projects. They cannot deliver, excuse me, for the people of Western Australia. I think the most disappointing thing about this budget has been the lack of major structural reform in our economy. You know, when you're going through a period like this is unusual. This period won't last. We won't enjoy these massive mineral incomes for much longer. So you use this time to make the structural reforms in your economy that you need to make. And that means areas such as stamp duty that are a discouragement on investment in many cases. Areas such as, in particular, payroll tax, a tax on jobs, and especially for small business and medium-sized business. No meaningful, in fact, there's nothing meaningful in the budget. In stamp duty, there's a little bit of reform around build to rent, which I support and I've encouraged previously, but otherwise we're not seeing any major changes there. We're not seeing any changes in payroll tax, which is a tax on job. You know, one of the biggest issues we're facing right now is inflation. Those fees and charge increases I've talked to you about all contribute to inflation. So we've got a state government that isn't helping households. They're contributing to inflation that's going to hurt households even further. They're not delivering the major capital projects that they promise, and they're not undertaking the major structural reform that any responsible government would undertake when they have this sort of surplus. And that's why I say this is a budget of missed opportunities. It's a disappointing budget. You know, I'm sure the Premier will go out there and he'll be spruiking all of his credentials, but his major claims are just false. And as I say, I'm extremely disappointed that they've missed this opportunity to provide meaningful help to households and meaningful reform that would help our economy in the future.